Today we're going to be talking about query parameters and route parameters in Express. So just before this we talked about how we can have a route here, for example, that is going to correspond to the slash and it'll respond with this. So this is a very general case though, because we're not getting much information from the client. Most of the time when we're building dynamic websites, we want the client to be able to send us some information that affects what we show them. A really simple example of this can be found if we go over to Google. So let's go to google.com/search, and then I'm going to pass in something q equals, and let's try dogs for this example. And so we're going to see here that it actually searched dogs for me, and that's because this is the query parameter that's being sent from Chrome to the Google servers, and it's telling them that my query is dogs. So the query here is defined by Q. This could be anything. Google's just deciding to call it Q, probably for shortness. But we can also change this to like Halloween, which is coming up, and we see that this also changes to reflect that I searched for Halloween. So this is a practical example of query parameters. Now let's learn how we do it in Express. So we're going to be over here, and so if you remember before, we talked that rec is actually the request, so it has all the information from the request coming from the client, and that's this object here that Express is passing us to our callback function. So let's make this route, instead of just saying welcome to Express, let's make it say welcome and then a name. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to change this, we're going to use ES6 template strings, and we're going to say welcome. And we want a name here, but the name is actually attached, like I said, to that rec object. So it goes in rec.query.name. And so I'm going to save this. Nodemon restarted for me. And now if we go back to Chrome here, we'll see that I can actually pass in name is equal to Andre. And correctly, it responds welcome Andre. And so this we can change to anything. This could be John. This could be Frank, right? Anything. Also, it's important to note that if we don't pass anything in here, what happens? It's just going to be undefined, because in JavaScript, it's going to look in the query object and see that there's no thing with the name key, and so it's just going to be undefined. But the important thing to remember is that the way that we pass query parameters into the URL is with the question mark, and then the name of the parameter. So for us here, it's name, and then an equal sign, and then finally the value. All right, so this is great, but this is actually only one way of passing data through the URL. Express has something else that's not actually part of the HTTP protocol, but is also supported by Express, and we call those route parameters. And it behaves very similarly, except instead of passing in our information with a question mark, the key name, an equal sign, and the key value, we're going to actually pass it in just straight through the URL. So let me show you how that's done. So here I'm going to have a new input called greet, and I'm going to pass in as well the route parameter. So here I'm going to say :name, and then just like before, rec res, and then very similar to before, res.send, welcome, and we're going to do rec.param.name. And so this is actually coming straight from the URL this time that we're predefining in Express. So let's try it. I'll say greet and then Andre. Oh, sorry, this is actually params. And let's try it again. And now we see that it's coming through. So here we see that the data that we're passing through is actually part of the URL, and we're defining it here. So what would happen if in my browser I actually left out that last thing? We'll see that Express throws an error and it says it can't get that path. And that's because here we've defined that this app.get is going to actually have two parts to the path. It's going to have greet and it's going to have this name thing, but we're just telling Express that it's going to be a variable that we're going to be able to access with rec.params. All right. That's it for query parameters and route parameters. These are both really useful ways to pass data to the front end using get methods.